Today, and I literally mean day, the sun is still up for probably another hour to an hour and a half, is 3 days before the full half moon. What you're seeing on the screen, possibly, is the moon, but a very low contrast version because it's bright outside. So basically tonight's observing plan is to return to observing galaxies and clusters that are on the astro.geekjoy.com Deep Sky Atlas, which is the basis for most of my lists for galaxies, except when I go adventuring by just stepping through NGCs. The moon, as I said, is 4 days into the first quarter, which means another 3 days or so before it is a half moon. The only way to see it from the observatory is to catch it early on while the sun's still up, which gives a very low contrast view. I believe the setting is at 1/500th of a second to show you what you can see there. So the sky is a little patchy with faint clouds, but last night I expect as it gets darker, it may improve in terms of transparency, although I see some darker clouds off to the west. So conditions may not be satisfactory for the evening. We'll just have to wait and possibly see. All right, testing 1, 2, 3. It's pre-sky dark. There's still a tint of blue to the sky. We're operating at 150x, 2 flood. We don't expect to see Messier 3. What I'm going to do is run a test of sky conditions. This is kind of a baseline check of the conditions. There are some high thin clouds, mostly to the east, but the clarity of the atmosphere seems to be progressing towards that direction from the west. I have a list of studies that I wanted to return to for this evening if conditions warrant it. We expect to see the beginning of the resolution of Messier 3 on the screen when we get to 8. Oh, wrong way, Jeff. Let's go to 8 flood. Beginning to see stars on the screen in general. We go to, I'm sorry, that was 4 flood. We go to 8 flood and we are seeing the core of the galaxy. Now that, plus some resolution of stars, and I do believe that's the point we expect to see them when we're operating at 150x f8 without the focal reducer on the CCD imager, Rev2 imager. So it's very promising in terms of sky transparency. At least it's as good, roughly, comparably to what it was last night. If I continue to push, 16 flood, it'll take longer and longer for the image to form, but we will see the core, and then we will begin to see numerous stars well outside the core. 32 flood, roughly the equivalent of an 8 or 9 inch scope. In fact, in an 8 or 9 inch scope, I would be very happy to see Messier 3 as bright as that, although the stars would be much smaller and the resolution would be better. I'm assuming at this magnification, at least for faint stars, we can separate stars by about 1.1 arc seconds. But the screen does tend to get overwhelmed as soon as you start pushing up the exposure time, as you will see here. I did take some time realigning the scope. I didn't like the difference between the eastern and western hemispheres, so I made some mechanical adjustments to the declination and basically the azimuth of the scope. Ooh, look at that. Very nice. 64 flood, by the way. The 12-inch view is probably the best for globular clusters. If we go ahead and continue to push it, we'll see fainter and fainter stars well outside the core. They should get to the point where the entire cluster stars become visible at the very edges of the screen, which is 14 arc seconds, or 14 arc minutes across and 10 arc minutes wide. Now operating at about 16 to 18 inch aperture. We'll push it to 256 just to get an idea of the view. Now we're looking as though almost the view that I've gotten of globular clusters looking through the 30-inch reflector at Fremont Peak near San Juan Bautista in Northern California. So all that in a 6-inch scope. So there's our baseline view for tonight. I would say things are looking quite good. We'll do a few more baseline checks maybe with the Sombrero Galaxy next before we go off to the observing schedule for tonight. So have that last look. Here it goes. Well, the scope decided it wanted to do an equatorial flip. I have made no effort whatsoever to center Messier 104, the Sombrero Galaxy, in the screen, and there it is. Time now is 9:45. We're now rapidly approaching the Midsummer's Night Dream, which is really the solar solstice on June 21st or thereabout. We're less than a month away, so nighttime is getting very short. Hours are late for observing, and studies such as Messier 104 are rapidly progressing towards the west by the time it gets dark. Even though it's about 10 minutes to 10 right now, I'm still seeing blue in the sky. I don't have a lot of confidence in the eastern sky because it does appear as though there is quite a bit of water vapor up there. But there's our baseline view at 256 flood of the Sombrero Galaxy. Screen looks a little bright to me. I might play with some of the settings, but I've got everything zeroed out in the TFT display. So what I'm going to do now is, I did want to make an observation that I think the model parameters now for the 3-star alignment that I did to the west are a little tighter now than the model parameters to the east. It kind of pendulates back and forth if you start making mechanical adjustments. But I've never been able to get them to be harmonious. And even though I've got the scope leveled and counterweights set up properly on terms of the deck and the optical tube assembly itself, I did notice when I had to adjust the diagonal that star position shifted quite noticeably when I was trying to make sure that it moved orthogonally when I used the hand controller. And by that I mean if I press a button, I like to see things either go left or right or straight up and down. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and go to the observing list for this evening. Well, despite the nice alignment to the Sombrero Galaxy, we've just made a big leap of probably more than 50 degrees to the southern Ursa Majoris, to a galaxy NGC 3938. We are not seeing it at full aperture because we're getting the roof of the observatory to partially block the aperture. So we're probably getting 60% of the light that we might get because of the roofing of the observatory. I didn't expect to be able to actually get a view of this. It's practically vertically overhead. NGC 3938, Galaxy in Ursa Majoris, it's magnitude 10.4, 5.1 by 5 arc minutes, a face-on spiral with a core, 40 million light years distant. This is not the view you'd expect to get. And the galaxy itself is way up in the bright region right here on the screen. It'll be an interesting thing to check. I doubt we'll make out much of it. We're losing some aperture. I could see it on the TFT display. It's roundish, like face-on with some faint halo around it, but that's about it. We won't be seeing it on the screen. I'm not going to bother to try to center it into the higher definition region of the TFT screen and the camera, given the fact that it's so far north and partially blocked by the roof. But at least we now know we can get to almost 45 degrees north vertically with some of the studies that are almost overhead. So I have a general idea now for the future. Let's go on to the next study. Our next study is adventitious. I was just skipping through the catalog from the last study to NGC 3946, a galaxy in Leo, magnitude 15.5, 0.5 by 0.4 arc minutes, spiral of A, maybe that means axial, 293 million light years distant. Now, I'm hoping it would be visible down here in the screen. I am seeing a galaxy right at this point here, but who knows? I'd have to do an alignment. There's another one up in this region as well as here. So there are several galaxies present. So what I might do is do a quick check right now with Denebola and see if it centers where it ends up on the screen, and that'll give me some hints, and then I'll go ahead and just do a resynchronization of Denebola for the rest of these studies. So, if Denebola turns up towards the middle of the screen, maybe in fact we are seeing a 15.5 magnitude galaxy right there on this evening. Well, that's where Denebola turned up, right there. So, even though I had realigned everything, I just probably made it worse from last night. I'm going to continue to play with it during the lunacy and see if I can get the parameters for east and west to fall in to reasonable values, all of them below 2000. So I'm going to go ahead now and recenter Denebola and resynchronize before I proceed to the next study on my list for tonight. I thought you might like to see where I synchronize Denebola to. Ideally, anything we're looking for in the region of Denebola, comma Virgo, etc., will fall into that area of the screen. So I just basically, the model's the same, it's just been tightly, somewhat tilted and adjusted for synchronization purposes to display anything we're seeing around that region. So let's go on to our next study of the evening. Messier 63, a galaxy in Canis Venatici, quite bright. Magnitude 8.6, but also very large, 12.6 by 7.5 arc minutes, 37 million light years distant. All I'm seeing of it is just that core right there, if that is indeed it. But that's just what I can see. I have no idea about the screen. Of course, we just got a satellite passage. So we might wait for a little bit at 256 flood to see if any of its galactic extensions appear to confirm that it is in fact Messier 63. So I'll try to sit still here. Of course, I'm not sitting on the pillow right now. I didn't expect to be shifted. We'll give it about 10 more seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5 Mississippi, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and terminate this, and then we'll go on to our next study. Well, I didn't have Messier 64 on my observing list, but as I was stepping through the Messiers to get to 83, I decided, hey, M64, galaxy in Comma Berenices, magnitude 8.5, 10.3 by 5 arc minutes, a mere 19 million light years distant. Probably galaxy a little smaller than our own at that distance. And there's our look, and you can see all kinds of extended nebulosity around it. Very circular. It says it doesn't specify the class here, but I would call it a ringed. It does seem to have certain annularity to it. I'm sure the look will be better tomorrow on the actual screen. I'm not in a very good position. But I'm impressed. I may or may not have captured this already, and if I have, I would have done it at 75x, not 150. So, I'm going to skip on. Progressing towards Messier 83, and if I see something of particular note, that should be visible, we'll do that. There were some issues with Messier 66 last night, so I figured since I was skipping through the Messier catalog, we'd have another look at it this evening. This is clearly 66. Galaxy in Leo, magnitude 8.9, 1 by 4.1 arc minutes, 35 million light years distant. For some reason, it looked like when I plugged in followed 65 with 66 last night, that we were basically just seeing 65 again. This is pretty definitive here. The aspect ratio on 66 at 4:1 is much more clearly seen, and I'm very confident this is a good, and it's a very decent view of Messier 66 at 175x, and I'm glad we've had a look at it. I'll continue to skip around and go to Messier 83. If something turns up that's of interest, hey, why not? Messier 66, we salute you. What we're seeing, hopefully, is Messier 83. Messier. I made a Messier, apparently, of getting the new model and put into the scope because I haven't had any confidence. I've had to constantly resynchronize. I checked against Spica, although it was visible on the screen, it wasn't in a very good position, so it's very difficult to be sure about anything. But I'm going to give a probability that we're seeing the core of Messier 83. It's a very large galaxy in Hydra, magnitude 7.8, but at 13 by 12.2 arc minutes in extent, and 15 million light years away. That's not relevant. But anyway, 13 times 12, that basically says you've got something like 160, which is like 8 magnitudes fainter as the average surface brightness. So this average surface brightness of this galaxy is pretty much about magnitude 14.5, and I have to do the calculation in the morning. Of course, the core is brilliant, if that is indeed the core. And we should be looking for extensions that go very much all the way out to the edge of the field. Now, I have seen Messier 83 through a 22-inch telescope. Thank you, El Marco. And I have seen a large extent. We are not seeing that here. At least I'm not seeing it on the screen. The galaxy is very broad, faint, but you can see much of that 13 arc minutes of extension at the eyepiece. This is probably a galaxy that would be better looked at using a lower magnification, frankly. But here's our view at 150x, and I'll check it out on the manana to see whether or not there's really more to the image than I can see on the screen. And if there is, then we've pretty much confirmed this is Messier 83. Galaxy in Hydra, magnitude 7.5, collectively 13 by 12.2 arc minutes, 15 million light years distant. Pretty biggie, so, but probably no bigger than our own Milky Way galaxy, which is about 100,000 light years across. Well, I just did a 2-star realignment on Arcturus and Denebola, and it may have done the trick. Our next galaxy is NGC 5247, galaxy in Virgo, magnitude 10, 5.4 by 4.9 arc minutes in size, so pretty much a face-on spiral with a large bar. And the core, it's 62 million light years distant, and it's right in the middle of the screen, but not particularly in the high contrast area. So now we're going to have a look at 5248, which was actually on my list. It's a galaxy in Boötes. I am going to send it there now, and we can watch it assemble. It's also another largest 5 arc minute size galaxy face on. Get a sense of whether there's any structure. We're heading north as I speak, and we'll give it the requisite 20 or 30 seconds to take form as I give you the lowdown on it. 5248. NGC, typing it in now into the database. Be nice if I could remember all this information, but you don't have to, and nor would I want to actually carry it around in my brain. Well, the galaxy is quite obvious. Of course, it's in a low contrast area of the screen. NGC 5248 is a galaxy in Boötes, magnitude 10.3, 5.9 by 4.5 arc minutes, 49 million light years distant, a spiral with a large bar and a small BC designation, has a fainter line of sight or potentially actual neighbor, as well as another one over here. So there's a number of galaxies in this region. And what I may do is go ahead, because I think there's some extended nebulosity present. I think I'm going to see if I can navigate it to a better position on the screen. Let's see where she jumps. There's a bright star over here. Good, I wanted to see that go in that direction. Yeah, I'm seeing spiral arms on this. Let's see if we can make them out. Oh yeah, that's in a good high contrast region. Let's give it some time. We should see a spiral. Look like a single spiral arm just unwinding in a clockwise direction from what I can see of the residual image. So this might be a very nice galaxy to look up sometime. Brightish, face on, spiralicity. Oh. And you see 5248. Give it another 10 seconds. And then I've got to move on because I've lost a bar on the camera battery, and I have several more studies to go through. We'll be jumping up to 5466 on the next. So here we go. Okay, what we're seeing here is a break from galaxy. It's a fairly sparse globular cluster. And you see 5466, globular cluster in Boötes, magnitude 9.1. The brightest stars of magnitude 13.8 is 54,000 light years distant. So I'm not seeing any luminous core to this globular cluster. Maybe right in this region here, so it's pretty sparse. It's not indicating how many stars, but at magnitude 9.1, its brightest stars are only about 4 magnitudes fainter than the cluster as a whole. So that suggests to me that it's pretty sparse, but I'd have to give it some thought. So there's our look. The stars are looking a little bit nebulous to me. Maybe there's some atmospherics, but here looks like this is where the core is. Keep in mind, this doesn't have a specification. Oh, it says it's not magnitude 9.1 and 9.2 arc minutes in size. The numbers were so close I wasn't sure which one was which. So it should all fit on this screen, but I don't think I've ever seen as sparse a globular cluster. This looks like an open to me. It does bear some investigation. So if I get motivated on the morrow, I'll look this baby up and see if there's anything special about it. There is a designation of type 12, X11, in Roman numerals on this data spread for the globular cluster. So we're going to be moving on. Our next study is Galaxy 5363 in Boötes. I'm going to have to look up the data. I was worried about my camera suddenly deciding to take a break. 5363, as I recall. I'll give you the information on it. As soon as it's accessed, you can see the galaxy in the high contrast region before you. Brightish core. NGC 5363 in Virgo. Magnitude 10.1, 4.6 by 3.1 arc minutes, a spiral of class A, 50 million light years distant. Still haven't taken the time to figure out what the subletter A, a lowercase a, is supposed to represent. Maybe axial, I don't know. So anyway, there's our look at that one. It's got a neighbor. Oh, I pressed the back button. Wrong button. Okay, 53. I think its neighbor is 5364. This one here is a 10-inch study. The other 64 is for a 12-inch scopes. Let me go ahead and give the camera a break with the power running down. I would like to be able to say we're now looking at Galaxy NGC 5364. The last Galaxy was in Bootes. This one's in Virgo, and I said, oh, they must be far apart. No, the scope made a very minor jump. This Galaxy is also known as NGC 5317. Its magnitude 10.5, largest 6.1 by 4.2 arc minutes. It's a spiral with a bar and a C and a P, 56 million light years distant. If we're seeing it on the screen, magnitude 10, like it's saying in that size, we're probably seeing the core right here. There are some fainter galaxies on the screen. There's a fairly brighter one up there. I shifted everything down because I've been having to do that all evening to be able to get things into the high contrast region. Well, whether this is 5364 or not, we are seeing some really interesting faint galaxies in here. These are probably of the 14th magnitude, but maybe 13.5, maybe 13 magnitude. It's quite a collection of them there. I would suspect, given its distance of 56 million light years, that this is really part of the Comma Virgo galaxy group. I'm just going to press the next button and see what comes up. The next galaxy is in Centaurus, and we are not going there. Another one in Centaurus. 5366 is a 13.7 magnitude galaxy in Virgo. So let's see where this baby goes to. That's a jump. Give the image a chance to form, and also give the camera a break. As before, I shifted the image to the right 5 clicks to get it down into the high contrast area. This is an adventitious galaxy NGC 5366, galaxy in Virgo, magnitude 13.7, 0.7 by 0.6 arc minutes, very distant, 397 million light year spiral of lowercase a. If we're seeing it, we're seeing it. I can't tell you that for sure, but there are certainly other galaxies in this image. Here's a faint one here, a brighter one here. This is probably around the 12th magnitude, 11th, 12th, maybe the 13th. The galaxy we're looking for is right in this region here if we're lucky. As I said, the probabilities for actually centering on things that are faint is really low tonight. Even though the parameters for GoTo look really sharp to the west, I'm not experiencing that. I'm going to have to redo everything again when I get a chance to have more confidence that we're actually going where we want to go. So let's hope that something turns up that's apparent on the screen tomorrow. We just made a complete equatorial flip to go to NGC 5846, galaxy in Virgo. Trailing edge, no doubt, magnitude 10, 4 by 3.7 arc minutes. It's a spiral, actually, I'm sorry, an elliptical of class O, which means it's a perfect circle. Supposedly 79 million light years distance. Obviously not a member of the Comma Virgo group, and I believe the galaxy is located right here on the screen. It's pretty impressive to do a complete flip and actually end up with something. It does have a bright neighboring galaxy right there. There are other galaxies on the screen. I will probably center up on this and see when we go to our last study of the night whether things center up or not. So this is our penultimate study. I'll center it up. We're in the good region, and then we'll make our next hop. So once again, NGC 5846, galaxy in Virgo, magnitude 10, 4 by 3.7 arc minutes, an elliptical of class O, probably the first one that I've noticed since I've been studying galaxies. What we're seeing here is one of the more spectacular globular clusters. This is Messier 5. We're seriously overexposed. The sky actually is looking pretty decent out. Let me give you some data on Messier 5, and then we're going to start as our final act of the evening. We'll start backing out in exposure times and give you a better view at a lower exposure time of what the globular cluster can look like. Messier 5 is a globular cluster in Serpens. Magnitude 5.7, 19.9 arc minutes in the parent size, 24,500 light years distant. It certainly does rival Messier 13. It's probably a little brighter than Messier 3. So I'm going to start stepping down through the exposure times so we can get a view. A little hard to see see, there it goes again. The actual contrast of what I'm actually looking at here gets to be problematic when the screen is like this. Okay, that's 256 flood. Let's drop it down to 128. So we're going from, let's say, a 24-inch nominal scope down to about a 16 to 18. Give it a chance to recompile the image. Still not a good choice in terms of the overexposure of the image. We can drop down again. 64 flood. Now we got something comparable to a 12-inch view, except in a real telescope in the eyepiece, the stars would be much better resolved. They wouldn't be these blobbish looking affairs that we're seeing on the screen. And more stars right across the core would be visible as stars. All right, let's drop down again. 32 flood, more like an 8 or a 9-inch scope. That's a pretty good view, but we're still overwhelming the core. Getting down in the 6-inch range. Four. 3-inch scope, we're not seeing it anymore on this screen. And then finally to 2. So where was the best view? Let's see if we can exit on that. I think it was somewhere around 32 flood, maybe 64 flood. And there's 64. We're seeing some fainter, further outlying stars, which give a better sense of the extent of the globular cluster, since it should basically fill this entire screen. Well, there is our Carpe Noctem view. Now it's off to hopefully a good night's sleep. Asta.